I met people like Professor Castellani. Professor Castellani was in his 60s, world famous. He isolated sleeping sickness, and he made the famous Castellani ointments. Professor Casimiro Frank, he was the first man to photograph brainwaves. He photographed the brainwaves of a rabbit. He told me one day that when there's paralysis in the muscle, it's not that the muscle is not receiving brainwaves. Many cases it's receiving the wrong brainwave, and he had to correct it to put the right one in to cure paralysis. And he was effective. He was doing a good job. Then I met the professor of the University of Rome, Gislero Flesch. He told me one night, I'm going to teach you the secret of life. And he taught me how the human cell vibrates, an electrical instrument. Now scientists proved that it is. So these type of events I learned in Rome. One scientist read my book. He picked out page 192 and 193 and 194, where I talk about this. Now, I used this material when I had to get into electromagnetism, because what we did in research and development, there was one strain that worked all the way through in everything we did. Electromagnetism showed up in almost every case. So electromagnetism was important. And then Wilbur Smith came from Canada and verified that for me. And then if you read Tesla's works, it verifies that. Electromagnetism, and Wilbur Smith of Canada called it the boundary areas of electromagnetism we have to study. So that was the Italian scientist. Now, this was very effective because as I was working on these artifacts, I remembered what these people had told me. The composition of the human body is what they were working on in Italy in 1942. Just think of that. Curing advanced cases of cancer in those days with a resonator. They claimed that the body would get out of resonance, and they had to put it back in. And they were working along that line. Yet it never spread, because the rest of the world and the American Medical Association and so forth said, oh, they're crazy, they don't know anything. These were brilliant men. The Castellani ointments, Castellani himself told me one day. Well, show you what kind of man he was. One of my counterintelligence agents was in the hospital one day, and the boy had swelled and he was itching all over his body, swelled up. So I went down there. He said, they're shooting me with penicillin, streptomycin, and I get worse. I'm miserable, all swollen, itching. So I told my driver, go get Professor Castellani, because he made the Castellani ointments for the skin, and bring him here. In the American hospital, of course, I needed an escort to get in. So he went in. About an hour later, my phone rings. I went back to my office, and it was Professor Castellani. He said, Senor Corso, I'll have your boy back to work tomorrow. I put some ointment on his hair. He said he's allergic to his own dandruff. Now, this was the type of man that Castellani, he was world famous at the time. And Castellani told me his ointment was based on, not that they put an ointment on the skin. He said when he put it on, it really affected, not to cure the bacteria, but to affect the atomic structure of the skin. So he said when he puts it on and it affects the atomic structure, he said the brain does the rest. That's his theory behind his ointments. And his ointments were world famous. I remember being a boy back in the United States buying Castellani ointments. Now you tell me that a pile of them have searched and they can't find any reference. There must be reference, because I had some books that he'd written. Where are they now? I don't. The book on Casimiro Frank, the photographed brainwaves, that book was gotten for me from a publishing house in Milano. I brought it home, and it was in Italian, and I gave it to some doctors, because I asked the people here, how come you're telling me this? They said, well, we like what you're doing in Rome, and we know what you're like, and you'll maybe remember this and tell people about it someday. Well, this happened. I got it in the book now, and the internet now is picking it up.
Okay.
They actually mentioned page 192 and 193, and I gave you the internet thing.
Okay. And let's say that the alien technology and the status of research already in the early 40s in Italy and some other countries, well, they show that maybe the future for humankind, from a technical point of view, will offer us some chances. What do you think that the status quo actually is, and when we are going technically wise?
Well, if you think now, when I talk about the body as an electrical instrument, and the cells are electronic, and even his laser cutter on the mutilation doesn't cut through cells that the extraterrestrials made. Now, in everybody's opinion, they think, well, he's talking about present day. I'm not. I'm talking about 1941 and 42, when these people were doing this here in Rome, when I was fortunate enough to be the Allied G2. And these people showed me this. The future, I think that eventually is going to come up. We're going to study this clone and possibly duplicate this clone. And what's it all based on? The human body is an electrical instrument. It's composed of electrical cells. Even AIDS, where I think that if they fight us, they're not going to fight us on our level with cannons and guns. If they're super intellect, they're going to fight us different. AIDS appeared in 1985. Where did it come from? Science now has discovered it's a living entity within the body. Now, I don't know if you ever read that. The science says it's a living entity. Where did it come from? I never heard of it before 1985. Maybe I should have. I was in intelligence. But it all once it appeared on the world. Maybe Linda Howe is right. It says alien harvest. Maybe that's what they're up to. But that's speculation yet, but that's what you tie together.
And let's say that from a propulsion point of view, we have here Carlos Diaz with us, and I wonder if we can talk about the difference between metallic objects and objects which apparently are directly connected to the bodies of these creatures. In other words, first of all, what do you think about the pictures that we saw before, and that what type of time machine was the one that you saw in a certain moment?
I don't know that. I discussed that with the Germans and with Hermann Obert. No, I don't know enough about that really to discuss the mechanism of a time machine. The British are closer to that. They were working on time machines in the past. And they were, the British got most of the documents at Peenemünde. They were there before us. They knew what was there. The British actually worked on a time machine. How far they advanced, how far it operated, I don't know. So I'm really not competent to talk about the structure of a time machine. Maybe I can talk about the peripheral area, but not inside. Because many people have asked me if I ever saw a flying saucer. I told them, well, that's not important. My whole operation is, if I see a flying saucer, immediately I think, I like to know what's inside that thing. Not that it's flying in the air, but what makes it fly. That's what I worked on. And as far as my interest in flying saucers is still, I like to know what's in there. And in the book, I answered his question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
He told me in Italian what it was.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I answered it all for him.
Yeah, but we need it in camera.
Oh, you still...
Yeah.
It wasn't that on when I answered?
Now it's on.
He asked me, are there things yet that we had which haven't been developed? Yes, certain things. Laser hasn't reached where it should be. Fiber optics and the integrated circuit, great developments. The integrated circuit, for example, has developed into a supercomputer. Marvelous thing. Look at your internet now, the way it operates. It's a marvel. Billions. The bytes go up in the billions. Fiber optics. Most of our communication today, even overseas, is fiber optics. Great developments. Others, like laser, haven't been developed to the extent. Even the composites that my son makes his airplanes from still haven't reached the development that I think they'll reach. So some of the items, and other items I saw, for example, the one that really hasn't advanced is alignment of atoms and metals. That hasn't really almost started yet. We failed 30 years ago, and it's still not in. It's still in the pre-development almost stage, I call it, whatever that means. But that hasn't advanced yet, and that's a great advancement. That alone could change the world. An automobile could last forever. All our weapons would be obsolete. You can't penetrate that thing. We tried to make it mainly so we could use our